I used to believe transformation happened from the outside in. Like millions of Americans, I spent years chasing physical changes first, trying every diet plan, fitness program, and supplement regime that promised to reshape my body, and by extension, my life. 10 years and thousands of dollars later, I was still struggling with the same issues. Weight that wouldn't stay off, energy that constantly fluctuated, and a nagging sense that something fundamental was missing from my approach to health. What I didn't realize then, but understand with absolute clarity now, is that sustainable transformation happens in the opposite direction, from the inside out. My journey began when I finally addressed what was happening inside my mind, not just on my plate or in the gym. Let me take you back to where it all started. 3 years ago, I was what most people would consider successful. A senior marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company, homeowner in a desirable Boston suburb, married with 2 healthy children. I had all the external markers of achievement. Yet beneath that carefully constructed facade, I was barely holding it together. My anxiety was through the roof. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing, unable to fall back asleep. I was irritable with my family, constantly distracted, and increasingly reliant on alcohol to wind down at night. My weight had crept up to the highest it had ever been, despite cycling through periods of extreme discipline followed by inevitable burnout. One Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage at work, trying to summon the energy to walk into the building, when a wave of panic hit me so intensely that I couldn't breathe. My hands went numb, my vision narrowed, and I was absolutely certain I was having a heart attack. After a terrifying ambulance ride and 6 hours in the emergency room, the diagnosis wasn't a heart attack, but a severe panic attack. The cardiologist looked at me sympathetically and said something I'll never forget. "Your body is trying to tell you something important. The question is, are you ready to listen?" That moment became my turning point, what psychologists call a pattern interrupt that created space for a new approach. But I didn't know where to begin. Like many Americans, I'd been conditioned to separate mental and physical health as if they were governed by different systems. I dutifully attended to my physical health through exercise and nutrition, albeit with mixed results. But I treated my mental state as something entirely separate, something to push through rather than address directly. My first instinct was to seek medication, a quick fix for the anxiety that was clearly derailing my life. The psychiatrist I consulted surprised me by suggesting we try a different approach first. Medication can be incredibly helpful, she explained, but before we go there, I'd like to explore whether we can address the underlying patterns that brought you to this point. She recommended I start with something that sounded deceptively simple, a mindfulness-based stress reduction program. I was skeptical, to say the least. The idea that sitting quietly and focusing on my breath could somehow transform my health seemed far-fetched. I was looking for something more tangible, more active, another set of rules to follow or techniques to master. But I was desperate enough to try anything, so I reluctantly signed up for an 8-week program at a local medical center. The first session was uncomfortable. Sitting still with my thoughts felt like being trapped in a room with someone I'd been avoiding for years. My mind raced between work deadlines, family responsibilities, and a running critique of how poorly I was performing at this supposedly simple act of meditation. The instructor, a clinical psychologist named Dr. Karen Martin, assured us this was normal. "The point isn't to empty your mind," she explained. "It's to observe what's already happening in there without getting caught in the current." Over the next several weeks, something profound began to shift. As I practiced observing my thoughts rather than being hijacked by them, I started to recognize patterns that had been invisible to me before. I noticed how often my eating was triggered not by physical hunger, but by anxiety, boredom, or the desire to numb uncomfortable emotions. I saw how my all-or-nothing approach to exercise was actually a manifestation of the same perfectionism that fueled my work stress. Most importantly, I began to witness how cruelly I spoke to myself about my body, my capabilities, and my worth, in ways I would never dream of addressing another human being. Dr. Martin introduced our group to the concept of the stress-reactive cycle, the neurobiological loop that occurs when our thoughts trigger stress responses, which then generate more negative thoughts, creating a self-perpetuating cycle that affects everything from hormone balance to immune function to inflammation levels. This cycle, she explained, is at the root of many of our modern health challenges. Breaking it requires training the mind, not just changing behaviors. This concept was revolutionary to me. All my prior health efforts had focused exclusively on changing behaviors. Eat this, don't eat that, exercise this way, sleep that many hours, without addressing the mental patterns driving those behaviors. It was like trying to solve a leak by repeatedly mopping the floor without ever looking for the source of the water. The science behind this mind-first approach is compelling. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that chronic stress triggers the release of cortisol and other hormones that, over time, disrupt virtually every system in the body. These hormones affect everything from how we metabolize food, to where we store fat, to how efficiently we build muscle. Studies from the University of California have demonstrated that stress management techniques can reduce cellular inflammation markers by up to 15%, more than many dietary interventions achieve. Perhaps most fascinating is the emerging research on the gut-brain connection. Scientists at Johns Hopkins have revealed that the gut contains its own neural network, often called the second brain, with over 100 million nerve cells. This enteric nervous system communicates constantly with our brain, with stress signals affecting digestive function, nutrient absorption, and even the composition of our gut microbiome. The implications are profound. Our mental state directly influences how our bodies process and utilize the food we eat. As I continued with the mindfulness program, I began implementing small but significant changes. Rather than jumping into another restrictive diet plan, I started practicing what Dr. Martin called mindful eating, paying full attention to the experience of eating without judgment, noticing hunger and fullness cues, and observing how different foods affected my energy and mood. Instead of forcing myself through punishing workout routines until I inevitably burned out, I explored movement options that I genuinely enjoyed and could sustain. But the most transformative change was how I spoke to myself. I realized I'd been operating with an internal drill sergeant who believed the only way to change was through criticism and shame. With Dr. Martin's guidance, I began practicing self-compassion, treating myself with the same kindness and understanding I would offer a good friend. This wasn't about letting myself off the hook or abandoning goals, but about recognizing that sustainable change comes from a place of self-respect, not self-loathing. The initial results were subtle but significant. My sleep began to improve first. I was falling asleep more easily and waking up less frequently during the night. My digestion, which had been problematic for years, began to normalize. My energy became more consistent throughout the day, without the dramatic crashes I'd come to accept as inevitable. These changes happened before I made any major shifts to my diet or exercise routine, evidence that addressing my mental state was directly affecting my physical health. About 2 months into this practice, something unexpected happened. I found myself naturally gravitating toward healthier food choices. Not because I was following rules or restricting bad foods, but because I was more attuned to how different foods made me feel. I became more consistent with exercise because I'd found forms of movement that energized rather than depleted me. Most surprisingly, I began naturally eating smaller portions and snacking less frequently, simply because I was more aware of my body's actual hunger signals versus emotional cues. Dr. Sarah McKay, a neuroscientist who specializes in brain health, explains why this mind-first approach leads to more sustainable physical changes. When we attempt behavior change without addressing our mental patterns, we're fighting against our own neurobiology. Stress-reactive patterns create powerful neural pathways that essentially put our health behaviors on autopilot. By practicing mindfulness, we create the space to recognize these patterns and consciously choose different responses. The most profound aspect of this transformation was how comprehensive it became. Unlike my previous health efforts, where improving one area often came at the expense of another, these changes seemed to build upon each other. Better sleep led to more energy for movement, which improved my mood, which made healthier eating choices easier, which enhanced my sleep quality further. Psychologists call this an upward spiral, the positive version of the downward cycles many of us get caught in. 6 months after beginning this mind-first approach, my body had indeed changed. I'd lost 27 pounds without dieting in the traditional sense. My blood pressure had normalized. My chronic digestive issues had resolved almost completely. But these physical changes, which had once been my sole focus, now seemed almost secondary to the mental transformation. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't at war with my body, or locked in cycles of deprivation and indulgence. I had developed a relationship with myself based on attunement rather than control. This transformation wasn't linear or perfect, and that's actually a crucial part of the story. Traditional approaches to health often frame setbacks as failures, evidence that we're lacking willpower or commitment. The mind-first approach taught me to view these moments completely differently, as valuable information and opportunities for deeper understanding, not as moral failings. About 8 months into my journey, I experienced what would have previously sent me into a tailspin. I went through an intensely stressful period at work, culminating in a week-long business trip where my carefully cultivated routines fell apart. I slept poorly, ate whatever was convenient, and had no time for formal meditation or exercise. In the past, this would have triggered my all-or-nothing thinking. Since I'd blown it, I might as well abandon all my efforts and start over later with another extreme plan. This time was different. Instead of harsh self-judgment, I brought curiosity to the situation. What was happening in my mind during this stressful period? How had my thought patterns shifted? I noticed that under pressure, I'd reverted to old mental habits, catastrophizing about work outcomes, ignoring my body's signals, and treating self-care as expendable. With this awareness, I could gently redirect, rather than abandon my practice entirely. Dr. Kristin Neff, a leading researcher on self-compassion at the University of Texas, explains why this shift in perspective is so crucial for long-term health. When we respond to setbacks with self-criticism, we activate the threat defense system, triggering stress hormones that actually make it harder to learn and change. Self-compassion activates the care system, associated with feelings of security and safety, which facilitates growth and learning. This more flexible, compassionate approach allowed me to navigate life's inevitable challenges without derailing my progress. I no longer needed perfect conditions to maintain my health, a revelation for someone who had previously used any disruption as an excuse to abandon self-care entirely. As my journey continued, I became increasingly aware of how our culture's approach to health had shaped my thinking. The American wellness industry, worth over $52 billion, largely promotes a mechanistic view of the body as something to be manipulated, controlled, and optimized through the right combination of diet plans, exercise regimens, and supplements. This perspective not only separates mind from body, but often ignores the broader context of our lives, our relationships, environments, and the societal pressures we navigate. Dr. Kelly McGonigal, a health psychologist at Stanford University, describes this cultural blind spot. We've been taught to wage war against our bodies, to battle our cravings, fight our fatigue, and overcome our limitations. This adversarial relationship keeps us trapped in stress-reactive cycles that undermine the very health goals we're pursuing. The mind-first approach offers a fundamentally different paradigm. Instead of fighting against your body, you learn to collaborate with it. Instead of imposing external rules, you develop internal awareness. This shift doesn't just change your relationship with food and exercise, it transforms how you experience being in your body entirely. This more integrated approach to health aligns with what researchers call the biopsychosocial model, the understanding that our physical well-being is inextricably linked to our psychological state and social context. Dr. Robert Sapolsky, a neuroendocrinologist at Stanford University, has extensively documented how psychological factors like perceived control, social support, and meaning literally get under the skin to influence our biology at the cellular level. For me, this understanding led to expanding my practice beyond formal meditation. I began examining the broader patterns of my life that were creating chronic stress, from my tendency to overcommit to my difficulty setting boundaries at work and home. I realized that no amount of kale smoothies or high-intensity interval training could counteract the physiological effects of living in a constant state of overwhelm. With the guidance of a cognitive behavioral therapist, I learned to identify and challenge the core beliefs driving these patterns. Beliefs like, my worth is dependent on my productivity, and taking care of my needs is selfish. As these beliefs loosened their grip, I found myself naturally making choices that supported rather than undermined my well-being, without the internal struggle that had characterized my previous attempts at healthy living. The physical transformation continued to unfold, almost as a side effect of this deeper work. By the 1-year mark, I had lost 42 pounds total, but more importantly, my relationship with my body had fundamentally changed. Movement had become a source of joy rather than punishment. Eating had transformed from a battlefield of restriction and indulgence to an opportunity for nourishment and pleasure. My body was no longer the enemy to be conquered, but a complex, intelligent system deserving of care and respect. My annual physical revealed changes that extended far beyond weight loss. My inflammatory markers had decreased significantly. My cholesterol levels had normalized without medication. My doctor was particularly struck by my heart rate variability, a measure of the autonomic nervous system's flexibility and a key indicator of stress resilience, which had improved dramatically. Whatever you're doing, she said, keep doing it. These changes reflect improvements at a fundamental level of your physiology. Dr. Emily Nagoski, a health educator and researcher, explains why this mind-first approach leads to such comprehensive changes. The body's regulatory systems, metabolism, immune function, hormone balance, function optimally when the stress response is properly managed. No amount of perfect eating or exercise can overcome the biological effects of chronic, unmanaged stress. Address the stress first, and the body can naturally move toward balance. This concept of working with, rather than against, your body's natural regulatory systems represents a profound shift from conventional approaches to health. Rather than forcing change through willpower and restriction, methods that inevitably trigger psychological and physiological resistance, the mind-first approach creates the conditions that allow the body to find its optimal balance. As word of my transformation spread among friends and colleagues, I began receiving questions about my secret. People wanted to know which diet I'd followed, which workout program I'd discovered. They were often disappointed when I explained that the most important changes hadn't been to my food or exercise regimens, but to my mental patterns and emotional relationship with myself. This reflects how deeply entrenched the behavior-first approach is in our culture. We've been conditioned to believe that the right combination of diet, exercise, and supplements is the key to transformation, despite overwhelming evidence that this approach fails for most people long-term. Research from UCLA has shown that while diets lead to short-term weight loss for many people, Approximately 95% regain all lost weight within 5 years, often ending up heavier than when they started. The mind-first approach offers a path out of this discouraging cycle. It addresses the deeper patterns that drive our behaviors rather than focusing solely on the behaviors themselves. It recognizes that sustainable transformation isn't about finding the perfect external formula, but about creating internal conditions that support natural balance and well-being. This doesn't mean that nutrition and exercise aren't important. They absolutely are. But their role and timing in the transformation process may be different than we've been led to believe. When we address our mental patterns first, healthy behaviors often follow more naturally and sustainably, without requiring the same degree of willpower and restriction. 3 years into this journey, the transformation continues to unfold in ways I couldn't have predicted. Beyond the physical changes, which have remained stable without the extreme effort my previous attempts required, I've experienced a profound shift in my overall relationship with life. The mindfulness skills that began as tools for health have extended into how I parent, how I work, and how I navigate relationships. Research from the University of Wisconsin Center for Healthy Minds confirms this ripple effect. Their studies show that mindfulness practices not only reduce stress and improve physical health markers, but also enhance cognitive function, emotional regulation, and interpersonal skills. The mind-first approach doesn't just change your body, it has the potential to transform your entire experience of being human. If you're someone who has struggled with the conventional approach to health, cycling through diet plans, exercise regimens, and supplement protocols without lasting success, I invite you to consider whether a mind-first approach might offer a different path. This doesn't mean abandoning nutrition and exercise, but rather approaching them from a foundation of mental awareness and self-compassion, rather than control and restriction. Begin by simply observing your current patterns without judgment. Notice the thoughts that drive your health decisions. Pay attention to how stress affects your eating, movement, and sleep habits. Explore practices like mindfulness meditation, cognitive behavioral techniques, or self-compassion exercises that address these underlying patterns. Most importantly, approach this exploration with curiosity rather than criticism, treating yourself as someone worthy of care rather than in need of correction. The journey from a behavior-first to a mind-first approach isn't always straightforward. Our culture constantly reinforces the idea that transformation happens from the outside in, that if we just find the right diet or exercise plan, everything will fall into place. Choosing a different path requires swimming against this powerful current and trusting a process that often feels slower and less tangible at first. But as my experience and a growing body of research suggest, this mind-first path ultimately leads to more sustainable and comprehensive transformation. It offers not just changes in physical appearance or health markers, but a fundamental shift in how you experience living in your body. From struggle to partnership, from control to attunement, from frustration to appreciation. If you found value in hearing about this mind-first approach to transformation, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced the limitations of the behavior-first approach? Have you explored practices that address the mental aspects of health? Your insights might help others who are searching for a more sustainable path to well-being. Consider subscribing to this channel for more content that explores the intersection of mental and physical health. I'm committed to sharing evidence-based approaches that address the whole person, not just isolated behaviors or symptoms. Together, we can expand our understanding of what true transformation entails and support each other in this deeply personal journey. Remember, the most powerful catalyst for lasting change isn't finding the perfect diet or exercise plan. It's developing a relationship with yourself based on awareness, compassion, and respect. When we transform how we relate to ourselves from the inside, the outside often follows in ways that are not only more sustainable, but also more aligned with who we truly are and what we truly need.